Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Emma DeFeatherston. I'm out of Moonshadow. I decided to teach this class when I saw Kat was had as her potential topics. I think there's 2 other Lysts classes going on this week, and they're focusing on different things. I'm going to focus on running lists for the big tourneys. There's a lot of things you can do with smaller tourneys. You can be a lot more flexible in your format and how you set that up. And I'm sure that they will cover that in great detail. But when you are faced with a tourney of, we're expecting no less than 50 people and possibly 100 people, the little things don't work really well. You have to just go ahead and throw a bunch of assumptions out the window and start with a new one. So I'm going to go through what we typically wind up doing a lot in the SCA, not always, but a lot is people will call it a round robin or we'll call it a Swiss 5. What I usually do is I build a Swiss 5, which is just 5 rounds of a tourney based on a round robin format, because that's easy to generate really quickly and you don't have to really think a whole lot about what's going on. So I'm going to turn on my first camera over here. Let's see. There is a participant named Jennifer Smith that has a couple of books in it. And so what I usually wind up doing when you go to sign up people for a list is have a scratch pad and just take down their names. If you have a lot of time to do it, go ahead and grab your handy dandy stack of index cards, and 1 index card per person. Bob and Fred, and you just go. What I'll eventually do, usually you want help for this, and so it's handy to have 2 people signing up. It's handy to have 1 person signing up and then the other person filling out the cards. So you might just make a list on a piece of paper with the names and then fill out the cards. Check with, of course, your the marshal for the tourney to find out what format they want to do it, how they want to pair the fighters, etc. When you're doing the big lists, they're usually like pair them whatever makes sense and is fast. I will frequently ask the fighters, how do you want to be called on the field? Because this is the card that the herald is going to read. And so sometimes we only want the first name. Sometimes we want their full title and everything. If it's something that is not English and therefore difficult to pronounce, do not be afraid to spell it out phonetically or put in parentheses, pronounced this, whatever. Don't worry about getting the spelling right, because the spelling is not for you, it's for the herald who's reading it out. And they will thank you if you put that Gaelic name in something that makes sense to read. The list heralds can go on about this at length, I'm sure. So what you usually wind up doing then is you have a stack of cards of people, and I usually just go ahead and assign them a number. And you can shuffle your deck before you do this. It's somewhat helpful for the first 10 or so people to be people that don't commonly fight each other, and we'll get to that why in a second. So if you have like a knight and his 5 squires comes up, don't put all their cards together. Shuffle them throughout the deck. And I'll just like put a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. And then I'll show you, these are my scratch sheets that I have had from previous crown tourneys and so forth. This was 28 fighters, which is actually not a bad size list. This was 12, and then I've got a couple odds and ends. So this is a card that was filled out. This was from 40th year, and this is a youth tourney. And so, well, these are buy cards, but this is the name of the fighter. And then every round, they wrote down who they fought and then what they did. When you're doing a giant tourney, you don't have time to write down the names. So that's when you use the numbers. So Jeanette fought fighter number 4. You would write down 4. Did she win or lose? Win, loss, whatever. And you just go on that way. But to build the tourney, so this is where you need another piece of scratch paper. So like I did, sometimes I use, you know, an index card, and I'll write out all my rounds. If it's going to be longer, I'll use a piece of paper. And the nice thing about doing a round robin is that a full round robin is everybody fights everybody else. So if you've got 5 people, this is not going to take that long. If you've got 10 people, it's not going to take that long. It's going to take longer. When you have 30, 40, 50, 60 people, it will take forever, and no one wants to fight that long. So we're only going to do 5 rounds. But we'll go ahead and pretend it's a round robin for how we set it up. And this is my method. This is not the only method. I say Jillian is to blame for me learning all this stuff. I think she taught me originally, and I've probably tweaked it since she did. But this is how I usually do it, is I'll just start, I've got one person in, there's a 1. They're going to fight number 2. And you basically just continue writing down your numbers like this.
I mean, they're back
7,
there.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, etc. However many. And as you get fighters signing up, you just add another one. And you keep going. If you wind up with an odd number at the end, then you're going to need a buy. I usually go ahead and make them a number and just put on a card, buy is number 16 or whatever, to fill that out. But that way you just keep adding it and you just keep going. And that's going to be round 1. That's it. So if you only have 1 list field, there's your field. If you have 2 list fields, let me do 15 and 16. So if you have 2 list fields, you can obviously divide it right there, and you have 4 on each field. If you have 3 list fields, you could divide it in 3, and you'd have 3 fights, and 2 fights. If you have 4 list fields, you could have 2, 2, 2, 2. So you kind of look at the size of your list, how many people you have signing up, and then you look at your size of your list field, and you figure out how much time do you want to spend. Because the smaller, you know, number of fights per field, the faster the whole thing is going to go. The downside to this is nobody can watch all the fights at the same time. So if you have people, you know, particularly like a King's Champion or a Queen's Champion, where they really want to watch all the fighters, it's kind of hard to do when you have 4 fields for them to be splitting their attention between all 4. But sometimes you're going to have to do that. So what you'll see sometimes at a tourney is you'll see a large number of fields, and then they'll gradually pare them down. I'll get to that at the end. So that's round 1. So round 2, how do you repair without going crazy? You can randomly shuffle your cards, and that's fine. But about round 3 or round 4, you're going to run into problems, because when you randomly shuffle your cards, you're going to be accidentally pairing people who have already fought. And then you're like, oh crap, and you've got to shuffle it again. And this takes time. So the round robin method of doing it is you take whatever number is in this spot here, and you're going to slide it down. So this is kind of hard to explain until you see it. So 1 is always going to stay where it is. 2 is going to drop down. And then you're going to follow this progression of numbers all the way around. So 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15. So I have to turn that corner. And then I'm going back up. 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, 6, and 4. And that's round 2. So you're basically going to do that every single round. And that's why I can sit here and write out my rounds, because I know this is going to be round 1, 1 through 28. And then round 2 is 1, 4, 2, 6, 3, 8, all the way around. This one we wound up adding people. They came in after round 1. Oh, I want to add the tourney. So we added on 4 people and just kept going. And so here's round 3. 4 drops down, and so there's 1, 4, and it just goes all the way around. And I think I've got the other 2 are on another piece of paper. And so you wind up, yeah, here's my last set. And I wind up scribbling out, I just put all these, we just racked this set. I'm scribbling this out so I don't get confused when I'm doing the next set. But that's how you go ahead and you pre-fill out who's fighting who. And that's why that first 10 people, you don't want them to be people who fight each other a lot, because it's 1 versus 2, 1 versus 4, 1 versus 6, 1 versus 8, 1 versus 10. And 3, 4, 2, 6, 4, 8, 6, 10, 8, 12. But if you look down at like halfway through, 1920, 1924, 1726, 1326, 926, they're pretty far apart. So it's really the first 10 people or so that you want to make sure, if you have that opportunity, make sure that they don't normally fight each other. They're not from the same group, that kind of a thing. You don't always have that possibility. Try. So this means that the people who are in, the top half are generally always going to be on the same field, but not quite, because when that rotation comes around, some are going to flip to another field. And the more fields you have, the more flips you're going to have between fields. But number 1 is always in the same field and is always the first fight. And they'll get tired of it, and it's fun. Just go for it. So that's how to build a basic shuffle of that. Does anybody have questions about that part of it? Because it takes a little bit to wrap your head around. Let's see here. I think there's a raise hand thing if you want to talk. Okay.
Yeah, if you go to participants and open that, you should have a raise hand next to your name.
Yep. And do that at any time. Okay. So then when you're, like I said, you're building the cards for a fighter. So let me do 2 more, a couple more cards, 3 and 4. Bob, Fred, Ivo is number 3. Cat is number 4. So this will be a very small round robin. But so in round 1, 1 and 2 are going to fight. So I could go ahead and pre-mark the cards on who they're going to fight now, but I usually don't even bother at this point. And then comes in the Herald book. So these are photo albums, 4x6 photo albums that I bought from Walmart. I think they're about $1 a piece. You can find them really cheap in the photo aisle. They are perfect for index cards because they have the slot is on one side and they're otherwise sealed. And they have this lovely little put a CD here thing that I usually stick in a cheat sheet for the list heralds, because as many classes we teach, and we do need to teach more of them, and people need to get more experience in it, there is always somebody who's new or just wants that refresher. And so this is our standard litany. It's not the only one that's ever used, but it's very, very common. And so it's handy to have somebody who's like, well, I want to do this, but I don't know what I'm doing. You're like, look here, cheat sheet, just read this. And that helps a lot. So the way we usually do list books in this part is this is going to be fighter 1, and this one is going to be fighter 2. And so the list herald just has to say, you know, Bob and Fred take the field, whatever. And then here is your next bout, or this one and this one. And so in this case, it's 3 versus 4. And so they go in pretty quick and pretty easy. So the way that we usually run tourneys a lot is when the list herald is sometime during the fight, they will pull these cards out. And Ivo can speak to this a lot more about paying attention to who won the fight, because they need to call it. They'll put the winner's card on top is the instructions. And whether or not the fighter brings it back to the list mistress table, or the herald brings it back to the list mistress table, or you have a kid runner bring it back, all those are valid options. Just the winner's card needs to be on top and it needs to come back pretty quickly because you're running a giant list. You need that information. So this comes back to me like this. and I know Fred won. Well, I can look at the other card, and this is when it's handy to have two people because you will get multiple fields and they're all coming in at the same time. And so I'll put Fred fought number 1 and he won. The other guy fought number 2 and he lost. And then I can just set these cards aside. Second set comes back. 3 and 4. I'll say 3 beat 4. And so 4, 1, 3. And it's handy to have good handwriting. I do not have good handwriting. So anyway, well, I can look ahead at my handy dandy sheet and I already know what's going to happen next. 1 is going to fight 4. And so I can, as soon as this card comes back, I can put it in the book. But wait, the Herald has the book. Haha, that's why you have an identical book. So while the Herald has one book, you have another one. And you can go ahead and start preloading the cards in as they come back. And this lets you, once you get the hang of it, you can usually have the entire book completely done and waiting on that last round. When they come back in, you mark those cards, you stick them in the book, and you say, next round is ready. And so that greatly diminishes the time between rounds. We don't have that giant gap of 20 minutes while we're waiting for, you know, people to get their act together. After, if it's a particularly hot day, the fighters about round 3 or 4 will be unhappy that the break between rounds is not very long. So, you know, it is, of course, up to the marshal about when the next round is actually going to start, but it's handy to have that set of books. What I will frequently do if I know I'm going to have multiple fields is I have different colored books. And so I always know the red books are going to be field 1, the blue books are going to be field 2. I've got green and yellow and orange and I think a light shade of blue. So I've got enough to cover a large number of fields at any time. And I always buy them in pairs of 2. So you have the currently being used set and the I'm prepping for the next round set. So you wind up doing that, and by the end, you will have a card that's completely filled out with all 5 rounds that they did, wins and losses. Frequently, at the end of the big tourneys, of course, they want to know who won. So that last round, as the cards come back in, you can start sorting them into piles by all ones go here, all losses go over here, you know, 4 wins, 3 wins, 2 wins, whatever. And then take it from there. But that is basically the gist of doing those big giant tourneys. You will occasionally get one where they want to do a big 5 rounds with a lot of people, and then they want to have a tourney bracket at the end. And so again, you need to talk to your marshal and find out, do you want the top 8? Do you want the top 16? It's always going to be one of those numbers. I highly recommend Googling for tourney bracket because I hate trying to remember how to write them out because they're supposed to be seated. This is not seated. Everyone is considered, you know, the same level regardless. But when you do a tourney bracket, you're taking the top however many, and hopefully you have that many in undefeateds, but you won't. So you take the undefeateds and you take however many from the next batch, and then you make the marshal decide, you know, we have 4 more slots to fill. We've got 5 people. Who isn't making it? And they'll go to whoever's tourney it is, if it's the, you know, the Baron's tourney, the Queen's tourney, or whatever, and have a discussion with who do you not want to see in the final. Or, you know, you've got, we need to pull 2 from the 2 ones. Which 2 people do you want to let in? And then, but then you use those rankings to seed it. And so number 1 is supposed to fight number 16 if you're doing a 16, and then it's, I have to go look it up. It's not 2 and 15. It's actually harder than that. But anyway, but there's a nice tourney bracket that you can find online that has all the numbers written out for which one fights which, and you basically renumber the cards based on that, and you just go from there. And then that's your single elim, or if they want to do a double elimination, there's tourney brackets for that. And that's the point at which, like I said, I find out ahead of time before the event what they're going to want to do, so you can go ahead and Google and print out a copy of a couple of tourney brackets, because you will need them at some point. But this you can do for as many fighters as you need. The only weird thing is when you have a bye, just go ahead and give them a number. If somebody drops out in the middle of the tourney, you're going to have to just have another bye. You can try to collapse that. If you already have a bye, you can try to pull both byes out and collapse it back up. But look carefully at what you've already fought and where you're going, so that you might want to write out, you know, what would round 8 or round 9 look like, and we're just going to skip to those pairings instead, to avoid people fighting people they've already fought before, because you don't ever want that to happen. So you have to be a little bit flexible with it. But this does a lot. I don't remember how many was in. I think the biggest tourney I've ever done was Jillian's Queen's Champion, her second Queen's Champion, I believe. And it was huge. And we signed people up ahead of time, which is not uncommon for the big tourneys like that. And so we had ahead of time a list, and they wanted 4 fields, and they kind of had them seated a bit where they had so many white scarves on each field. They had them all, you know, divided out, and then unranked, and then cadets, and then unranked fighters, and so on. And that was helpful, but it was still massive, massive, massive numbers. So we did that way. But yeah, I've done this. I can do this part in my sleep now. So. And I think that's the most that I had that I wanted to cover. I'm sure I skipped something. Questions, comments? Yes, these tools work for everything. Everything that you want a tourney bracket in, I should say. It won't necessarily work for archery or thrown weapons, because they don't do rounds like that. They're scoring them totally different. But for rapier or chivalric, where they have individual fighting and individual, it will always work for that. Youth and adult. Any other questions? I think that's all I had.
Okay, cool. Well, I know I learned some stuff because I've list mistress before, but I've never done it with the numbers that way. We've always just done random draw, so that would definitely go way faster.
Yeah, random draw is good up to a point, and challenges where they pair themselves are good, but when they pair themselves, it's going to take you a lot more time to get it set up, because you have to make record of what do they do.
Right.
And anytime that you can control, it's just going to work faster.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of the 2 books, you know, being able to get the cards in ahead of time and having them match. So awesome.
Can I throw something in?
Yes.
Obviously, like you said, the marshals usually set the pace of the fighting and so forth. I will point out, it's been my experience that the marshals are rip-roaring ready to go. That's fine. I've had you guys ready to go. And there have been a bunch of times where all the heralds are like, can we get 2 minutes to take a break?
Yes.
So if you are manning the books, by all means, being ready before the last fight is over is great. Not taking it away. But if we all look like we're about to drop dead out there.
Yes.
Be 2 minutes to go get some water. Even if you have to lie and go, well, we're still sorting. Go get something to drink. I've had that conversation.
Hopefully this will be covered in some of the other classes, but because there's a whole section on care and feeding of your list heralds. And yes, by all means, definitely make sure that they have the break they need. Because if they can't do their job, then your job isn't doing anything.
We'll probably do it anyway, and then you'll be picking us up off the ground like corpses when it's all done.
Yes.
Which isn't necessarily good either, so yeah.
Oh no, it's not good. We're just that stubborn.
Right, I hear you. Do you have somewhere where you have like the formula kind of written out, or could you post it somewhere?
I don't,
but I'm not positive.
Yeah, I will look for it. I want to say I want to say Callantyr has a book. And I think they have some stuff in there.
Okay.
And I'll have to go look if I can find a link. If not, I will write out a quick, here's a sample of,
Perfect.
you know, 10 people round robin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so you can see how it flows.
That'd be great.
Because
If
once,
you
I mean,
could,
it's a little hard to wrap your head around the first time, but once you get the hang of it, you can do any number.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Emma, if you could write that out into textbook format, it would make an
Yeah.
awesome appendices for the handbook.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea too.
In my copious time.
Yeah.
I'm recording this.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. I really appreciate it. And
Yes,
I'm sure
indeed.
everybody else does too. And hopefully, I'm sure everybody learned new things. 'Cause
Yeah. I was going to add a note. When I list mistress, I will often ask for help because, especially when you're doing multiple fields, you're going to have multiple sets of cards coming at the same time. And my handwriting is not the best. You know, if anyone can read my scribble, the list heralds will like come back to me and go, what is this? You know? And so somebody who has good handwriting gets to write. But it's a really easy job for somebody who has no experience in doing it because it's really easy just to write this down, and then you can learn it.
yeah.
And I will, if once we're allowed to have tourneys again, if anybody wants help at a table as a second, I will happily back up anybody for anything unless I'm otherwise occupied. But generally, I don't have children that I have to deal with anymore. So that's,
You're probably going to be doing it from opposite ends of a 10-foot table, just saying.
well, depends. But yes, after that, eventually.
No, I think it's worth pointing out because I had this conversation in my Herald's class. I'm just saying this from the outside looking in. I've seen you list mistress, God, since like day 2 when you joined. You've been at this as long as you've been playing. Part of that has always been the list mistresses or list masters are shoulder to shoulder sorting through this. That changes.
That's true.
I mean, we're not gonna see that in the next 18 months. I would be shocked if we do. And I think that's something we all need. I mean, I'm adapting my heraldry classes for the same thing. So it's something that we all need to keep in mind.
That's a good point because when I learned, I had volunteered to help Michelle, and she taught me, and I was sitting with her. So, but-
Yeah. Well, hopefully this will still be relevant 5 years from now. We'll see.
Oh yeah, I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
it will be.
It's just getting to that 5-year mark that's
Yes,
going to be
yes.
interesting.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Well, I
That's
will
all I have.
post this for others that didn't make it to review, and thanks a bunch, and everybody have a good night if nobody has any other questions.
Thank you a great deal, Emma. That was actually very informative.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
Awesome. Very cool.
I mean, I'll probably never list mistress or master, or however you say it, but knowing how the gears work certainly is helpful.
It helps you know, if you know what someone else is doing, then it helps you, do your own job.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to help write stuff.
There you
This
go.
is the type of thing, if someone could do a 1-page write out of it, it would make an awesome page in the appendices.
You're out of school now, right? So your school is over?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll get with you. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Emma.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.